Elon Musk came home late one night, completely drained after another brutal week packed with meetings and looming deadlines. As he made his way past his son's bedroom, he caught something unexpected, a soft little voice, whispering a prayer for him. Elon hadn't been ready for what he was about to hear. But in that quiet moment, the words his 5-year-old spoke would change him forever. It had been one of those endless weeks where the days blurred together in a haze. Non-stop meetings, urgent calls pouring in from the Starbase crew, long nights spent working at Tesla's Fremont factory, and a red-eye flight back after a whirlwind overseas trip, it all piled up. His mind felt like pure static. Mentally, he was fried. Emotionally, he was running on fumes. All that kept him upright was caffeine and the weight of responsibility. Now it was late Friday night, just shy of midnight. The house was still. He walked slowly down the dimly lit hallway of his private home, the soft glow of nightlights barely lighting his path. It was rare for the place to be this quiet. No chatter from Zoom calls, no blinking monitors, no children's songs playing from a tablet, just silence. It felt familiar, yet not quite comforting. As he neared his son's room, Elon noticed the door was slightly open. That wasn't unusual. Hex often left his door cracked open a few inches when he was falling asleep, a little habit that neither Elon nor the nanny had ever tried to fix. But tonight, something made Elon stop. It wasn't a sound or any sudden movement. It was more like a feeling, a strange tug, almost like a thread lightly brushing across his shoulder. He leaned in closer and caught a sound. His 5-year-old was speaking, his voice barely louder than a whisper. At first, Elon assumed he was just playing with a toy, maybe talking to himself the way kids sometimes do right before they drift off. But then a few clear, careful words reached him, and they stopped him cold. "God, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm trying." Elon's breath caught. He stayed completely still just outside the doorway, listening. "Can you help my daddy not be so tired?" The little voice continued. "He says he's okay, but I think his eyes look sad, and sometimes he forgets to eat." There was a small pause. "I love him even when he's busy. I just want him to feel like I see him." Another moment of silence. "And thank you for the stars. They make me feel like I'm not alone." Elon quietly stepped away from the door, careful not to make a sound. He didn't want to be noticed. Didn't want to interrupt what was happening. His footsteps felt heavier than usual as he made his way toward the kitchen, moved now not by routine, but by something deeper he couldn't quite name. In the kitchen, he switched on the faint stove light and slumped into a chair at the table. He poured himself a glass of water but didn't touch it. He just sat there, elbows resting on the table, head bowed low, replaying every word he'd just heard. At first, he felt nothing. Then, like a crack splitting open a dam, the emotion slipped through. The tears caught him off guard, not because he never cried, but because he hadn't realized how badly he needed to. They weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. They came the way real exhaustion does, slow, steady, asking for no permission. He wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his sweatshirt, leaned back in the chair, and stared blankly up at the ceiling. Elon had never taught his son how to pray. They'd never really talked about religion at home. Elon had always clung to reason, to science, to progress, things he could explain and control. But here was his little boy, kneeling in the dark, speaking to a God Elon himself had never introduced him to. And it wasn't the prayer itself that struck him most. It was who the prayer was for. The boy hadn't asked for toys, or games, or even for his own happiness. He had asked for his dad's tiredness to ease, for his sadness to lift, and above all, for his dad to know he was seen. Something deep inside Elon cracked open, something he hadn't even realized had been locked away. Later that night, he didn't go to bed. He stayed on the couch, staring out the window as the sky slowly shifted to a pale gray. He thought about the little boy asleep in the other room, wrapped up under his blanket, resting with full trust that someone seen or unseen was listening. The next morning, Elon made breakfast. It was clumsy, rushed, and halfway burnt, but he did it. He poured pancake batter onto the skillet and listened to it sizzle. He used too much oil. The first 2 pancakes stuck to the pan. The third one was barely acceptable. The fourth one was actually edible. When X padded into the kitchen, still half asleep and dragging his blanket behind him, he blinked up at the sight of his father standing over the stove. "Daddy made breakfast?" he asked, his voice small and full of wonder. "I tried," Elon said, offering a small, sheepish smile. X clambered onto the bar stool at the counter, eyeing the odd-looking pancakes. He didn't say a word. He just took a bite and gave a little nod. "It's good," X said simply. They ate in a comfortable silence for a while. Eventually, Elon broke it. "Hey, do you ever talk to God like that?" X looked up from his plate. "Sometimes," he replied. "Why?" Elon asked. The boy just shrugged. Because someone has to. Elon took a slow sip of his coffee and studied him. Do you think he listens? X held his gaze for a long moment before answering. I think he listens when you really mean it. That afternoon, Elon canceled 2 of his scheduled calls. Instead, he took X to the park. They wandered among the trees, kicked up piles of leaves, and built a rocket ship out of sticks and clumps of dirt. X took charge of the mission with the seriousness of a real NASA engineer, inventing words and narrating their imaginary launch into space. Elon didn't check his phone once. He stayed the entire time. Later that night, passing by his son's room again, he noticed the door was shut all the way this time. He paused, resting his hand lightly against the wood. He didn't open it. Instead, he leaned in just a little and whispered softly, only loud enough for himself to hear. If you talk to him again, tell him I heard you. A faint smile crossed his face, and he walked away. He didn't suddenly have all the answers. He wasn't even sure he shared his son's beliefs. But something inside him had shifted. Not everything, just enough. The following days didn't slow down. Elon's schedule had no mercy for that. Meetings still happened. Launch reports still came in. Emergency emails still hit his inbox at ungodly hours. But there was something different threading through it all, like a soft current beneath the noise, the memory of his son's voice in the dark. He couldn't shake it. Please help my daddy not be so tired. That simple sentence had lodged itself deep inside him, not because it sounded profound or poetic, but because it was spoken with pure, unquestioning love by someone who wanted nothing in return. And Elon hadn't just heard it with his ears. He felt it, with some deeper part of himself he wasn't used to listening to. One afternoon, in the middle of a design review for a new satellite prototype, Elon caught himself staring blankly at the data visualization screen while the lead engineer talked. He wasn't absorbing a word of it. His mind had wandered far away, back to that hallway, back to that cracked open door, back to that tiny voice. Later that night, Elon picked up the phone and called May. His mother was one of the very few people in the world who could speak to him without ever being overshadowed by his presence. She answered by the second ring. Her voice came through, sharp and dry, just like always. What is it? Elon. It's late. I know, he said quickly. Sorry. What's wrong? She asked. He hesitated, the words sticking for a second. Nothing's wrong, he said. I needed to ask you something. There was a brief silence. You sound different, May said carefully. I overheard X praying the other night, Elon admitted. I never taught him to do that. Neither did the school, he added. But he meant it. You could tell. May didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice had softened. What did he say? Elon repeated the words. When he finished, there was a long, heavy pause on the line. Then May said, You know, when you were 5, you did the same thing. He froze. What? You used to kneel at the foot of your bed, she said, and ask God to help me sleep better. To help me not be so busy all the time. You didn't really know who or what God was. You just had this sense that someone out there should be listening. Something twisted inside Elon's chest. I don't remember that, he said quietly. But I do, she replied. Did it help? He asked after a beat. He could hear the faint smile in her voice as she answered. It helped me know you were watching, that you noticed. And that's more than most people ever get. They said their goodbyes a few minutes later, but Elon didn't sleep that night. Not because of worry, but because something inside him had shifted again, and he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do with it. The next morning, Elon called a small meeting. Just 2 people, a family therapist he trusted, and a former child psychologist who had helped develop programs for gifted kids. He didn't want advice on rules or discipline. He was chasing something simpler. How do children learn to believe? He asked them. What makes them reach out to someone they can't even see? The therapist answered gently. They believe in what makes them feel safe, in someone who listens when the rest of the world feels deaf. The child psychologist chimed in. Sometimes, belief isn't really about religion at all. It's about connection. If kids don't feel heard by the people around them, they turn to the one place where they're allowed to speak without being interrupted. Elon nodded slowly, feeling quietly shaken by the thought. That evening, he sat down beside his son, who was deep in concentration, stacking small blocks. X's tongue poked slightly out of his mouth as he carefully built what looked like a rough version of a space station. Can I help? Elon asked. X gave a quick nod and handed him a block without looking up. They worked side by side, silently at first. After a few minutes, Elon spoke. I heard you talking to God the other night. X looked up, but there was no embarrassment in his eyes. Yeah, I wasn't trying to overhear, Elon said. I just happened to be walking by. That's okay, X replied easily. I wasn't hiding. Elon placed another block carefully onto the structure. I liked what you said, he murmured. X tilted his head curiously. Which part? All of it, Elon answered. Especially when you said you loved me even when I'm busy. The boy shrugged like it was obvious. That's just true. Elon swallowed against the sudden tightness in his throat. Do you think, he asked quietly, if I talked to him too, he'd listen? X met his eyes seriously this time. Only if you really mean it. Right? Elon said, almost to himself. They kept building their little space station together, not saying much more. Later that night, once X had drifted off to sleep, Elon walked into his office, sat at his desk, and simply stared at the wall for a while. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He closed his laptop, folded his hands together, and whispered, not a speech, not a promise, not even a full thought he completely understood, just a single word. God. Then silence. He didn't wait for a voice or a miracle. He waited for something quieter, a kind of permission to begin. The days that followed didn't look very different from the outside. Elon still got up before sunrise, still combed through flight schedules and engineering briefs before most people finished breakfast, still ran meetings, scrawled notes on whiteboards, and paced factory floors with that same restless intensity. But underneath all of it, something subtle had shifted. He started noticing things he used to miss. Not just projects, people. The way one of his oldest engineers paused before speaking in a meeting, as if wondering if his words still mattered. The way the woman at the Tesla cafeteria always tucked an extra sugar packet next to his coffee cup, even though he never asked for it. The way X would glance up from a toy rocket every time Elon entered a room, quietly hoping to be seen, but never asking outright. It wasn't that the world had slowed down. It was that Elon had finally stopped rushing past it. It showed in small, almost invisible ways. He lingered longer at dinner. He answered emails a little more thoughtfully. He asked real questions, ones he didn't already know the answers to. And every night, without fail, he walked past his son's bedroom. Most nights, the door was closed. Sometimes it was left slightly open, and once in a while, he caught the soft tail end of another whispered prayer. One night, after a brutal press conference and a delayed flight that left him sitting on a runway for 2 hours, he finally made it home close to 1 a.m. He expected the house to be silent, everyone asleep. But as he slipped off his jacket and headed down the hallway, he heard a faint sound, not from X's room, but from the living room. Curious, he followed it. There, curled up on the couch in his pajamas, was X. He had a small flashlight tucked under a blanket, making a little cave of light. Beside him sat a children's picture Bible, one Elon was pretty sure he hadn't bought. Hey, buddy, Elon said softly. X looked up, startled, but not afraid. You're supposed to be sleeping, Elon said softly. I couldn't stop thinking, X replied, clutching the flashlight. So, I wanted to read. Elon knelt down beside the couch. What were you thinking about? He asked. The boy shrugged. Just how God's always listening, even when no one else is. Elon raked a hand through his hair and sat down next to him. That's a pretty big thought for this late at night, he said. X closed the picture Bible and rested his head against Elon's shoulder. Do you think he listens to you too? The boy asked quietly. Elon hesitated. I'm not sure yet, he admitted. Did you try? X pressed. Elon gave a small, slow nod. Yeah, once. But it didn't really feel like anything happened. X was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered, sometimes it takes a while. You don't notice it right away. You just start feeling less heavy. Elon didn't answer. He just sat there, letting his son lean into him, letting the silence settle around them. Eventually, Elon carried X back to his room, tucked him under the blanket, and pulled it up to his chin. As he turned to leave, a small voice called out, You don't have to be perfect, Daddy. Elon paused and turned back toward the bed. Who told you that? He asked, half smiling. X grinned sleepily. I did. That simple line echoed in Elon's mind the next morning, and the day after, lingering like a soft light in a dark tunnel. He found himself going back to old things he hadn't touched in years. Old notebooks filled with scribbled ideas. Interviews he once skipped. Even old conversations about meaning that used to make him uncomfortable. One morning, he sat with a copy of a letter Carl Sagan had written to a student long ago. The words weren't religious, but they carried a deep humility, a sense of awe and curiosity, the very spirit Elon had tried to live by, though he often forgot to show it. He started writing again. Not for public eyes, not for the Tesla blog or press releases, just for himself. Short reflections. Questions he didn't have answers to. And beside each new journal entry, he left a blank space, a space for something he didn't yet know how to name. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Elon took X out to a small hill just outside the city. It wasn't famous, just a grassy rise that overlooked a sleepy park. They sat together on a picnic blanket, sandwiches and juice laid out between them, watching the birds drift across the sky. "I've been thinking about the stars," Elon said after a while. X perked up immediately. "Like for real? Or pretend thinking?" "For real," Elon said with a smile. X nodded eagerly. "What about them?" Elon glanced up at the wide sky. "When you told me they made you feel less alone, I never forgot that." X beamed at him. Elon went on. "When I was a kid, I used to stare at the night sky too. I didn't always know what I believed in, but I wanted to believe in something. Do you now?" X asked. "I'm starting to," Elon admitted. "But I think I'm still figuring out what believing really means." X leaned back on the blanket, folding his arms behind his head. "It means you're listening for something, even if you can't hear it yet," he said thoughtfully. Elon chuckled. "That's a pretty good definition." "I made it up," X said proudly. "I know," Elon replied, smiling wider. "That's why it's so good." When they got back home, Elon began shifting small pieces of his life. Before bed, he started setting aside a few quiet minutes not to check his phone, not to plan the next day, but simply to sit still. He didn't call it prayer. Not yet. But sometimes he folded his hands. Other nights, he just closed his eyes and sat there, sorting through the day, thinking about what truly mattered and what could be left behind. And always, he thought about X, the boy who believed without being told to. The boy who spoke softly in a world full of shouting. The boy who noticed things most adults had long forgotten to see. One night, as Elon walked past X's door, he found himself stopping again. This time, the door was open. X was already fast asleep, but beside his bed, a small folded piece of paper caught Elon's eye. He picked it up carefully. On the outside, in large, uneven handwriting, were the words, "For Daddy." Inside was a crayon drawing, rough, colorful, but unmistakably clear. Two figures, one tall and one small, standing side by side under a dark sky full of stars. Above them, written in bright yellow crayon, were the words, "God sees us, too." Elon stared at the picture for a long time. Then he slowly lowered himself onto the hallway floor, leaned back against the wall, and let himself feel, really feel, whatever this was. Grief, hope, softness, surrender. He didn't try to name it. He didn't try to fix it. He just let it be. Maybe, without realizing it, this was the beginning of something deeper. He didn't move for a long time. The drawing sat in his lap, the colors slightly smudged where his thumb had pressed too hard. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the air system and the occasional creak of the settling walls. In his mind, he kept hearing those simple words, "God sees us, too." Elon wasn't the kind of man who usually sat in hallways. Stillness had never been his instinct. For most of his life, movement was his answer to everything: fear, doubt, loneliness, even grief. Keep building. Keep solving. Keep going. But tonight he didn't move. Not because there was nothing left to do, but because, for the first time, he understood. Sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was simply stay. The next morning, Elon placed the crayon drawing gently on his nightstand. He didn't frame it. He didn't scan it. He didn't post it on social media. He just left it there, next to his watch and his phone, like something sacred, something that didn't need to be explained. A reminder, not a prize. And over the next few days, something else began to shift. He started noticing the way his voice changed when he spoke to people. It wasn't that Elon spoke louder or softer, it was that his voice became clearer, more deliberate. He stopped rushing to fill silences with business jargon. He let questions hang a little longer. And during one especially tense executive meeting, when a young product lead stumbled nervously through a prototype presentation, Elon did something that caught everyone off guard, even himself. Instead of cutting in or pushing forward, he paused. Then he said, calmly, "It's okay. Let's slow down a bit. Walk me through what mattered most to you when you built this." After the meeting ended, someone quietly remarked that Elon sounded less like a CEO and more like a mentor. He hadn't planned it. He hadn't even realized he was doing it. That night, over dinner, X asked him a question. "Do you think God loves people who don't talk to him?" Elon blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "Like, if someone's too busy, or scared, or doesn't know how to pray, does God stop loving them?" Elon slowly put his fork down, thinking carefully. "I don't think love works that way," he said. "Then how does it work?" X asked. Elon thought about it for a while before answering. Maybe love just waits." X smiled wide. Like when you wait for me to figure things out? Exactly, Elon said, his voice soft. Later that week, Elon asked one of his private staff members to track down an old pastor he vaguely remembered meeting once at a charity event. They hadn't talked beyond polite conversation, but Elon remembered him calm, genuine, someone who didn't push, didn't preach, just listened. They arranged to meet at a small cafe, far from reporters and cameras. When they sat down, Elon didn't bother with small talk. He got straight to it. I overheard my son praying for me, he said. And it's been changing me in ways I don't really know how to explain. The pastor nodded slowly. Children have a way of doing that, he said. I'm not really a church guy, Elon admitted. You don't have to be, the pastor replied. I'm not even sure I believe, at least not in the traditional way, Elon added. The pastor smiled warmly. You don't have to start with belief, he said simply. Then what am I supposed to start with? Elon asked quietly. The pastor leaned in a little, smiling. Start with gratitude. With silence. With curiosity. Those three things will take you somewhere, even if you don't know where you're going yet. That night, Elon didn't exactly pray, but he did sit alone in the dark of his study, hands folded loosely, and whispered one simple thing. Thank you. He wasn't even sure who he was speaking to. Maybe it was for the little boy who had shown him what love looks like when it doesn't have to be earned. Maybe it was for something or someone larger than that. Maybe both. The following weekend, Elon took X on a long drive upstate. They ended up at a quiet lake where the stars were brilliant and the air hummed with nothing but stillness. No city lights. No echo of machines. Just them and the open sky. They sat on the hood of the car, munching crackers and tracing constellations with their fingers. Do you think God is out there? X asked suddenly, his voice almost blending with the night. Elon tilted his head back, gazing up at the endless dark. I think God is wherever love is, he said softly. Even out in space, especially in space. Because that's where people probably feel the most alone. X was silent for a moment, taking that in. Then he said, then I think he was with you when you were working those really late nights. Elon turned, caught off guard by the certainty in his son's voice. Why do you think that? He asked. X shrugged a little, smiling. Because I prayed for that. Elon didn't say anything. He just pulled his son close, rested his chin gently against X's messy hair, and breathed in a kind of peace, a peace he hadn't invented or earned, but had simply been given. The next morning, back home, Elon opened his notebook. On the first page, he wrote just 4 words. Don't rush the good. And underneath, he added, when a 5-year-old teaches you faith, maybe that's exactly how it was meant to begin. Elon never told anyone about the night he overheard his son praying. Not his friends. Not the board. Not the media. It became something he kept tucked away, like a small ember hidden in the lining of an old coat, always warm, always glowing, but unseen by the world. It didn't stop him from working. He didn't suddenly retire or reinvent his life in some grand gesture. But the change inside him grew deeper over time, like roots stretching quietly beneath the surface of a tree. And in those moments when the world started spinning too fast again, when stock market alerts buzzed through his phone, or when prototypes failed after months of work, he would return to one quiet memory, a small boy kneeling by his bed, praying for his father to feel less tired. It didn't slow him down. It grounded him, not into stillness, but into meaning. Months later, Elon was invited to speak at a private summit in Colorado. A few hundred leaders from across tech, energy, finance, and medicine gathered at a low-key mountain resort under the banner of innovation and progress. Normally, Elon would have skipped it unless absolutely necessary. This time, he brought X with him. While Elon attended panels and closed-door strategy sessions, X spent his days wandering the trails with a childcare aide, collecting pine cones and sketching rockets in a battered notebook, always with smiling stick figures inside. The night before Elon was set to give the closing fireside chat, he stood alone on the balcony of his room, looking out over the dark sweep of trees. X wandered out quietly to join him. Did you know there are stars you can only see from certain places? X asked. Elon smiled. I did. Some only show up once a year. X hugged his arms around himself against the chill. Do you think God hides them, just so someone has to go looking? Elon glanced down at his son, thoughtful. Maybe, he said slowly. Maybe he waits for someone to notice. X nodded seriously. I hope when I grow up, I still want to look. The next evening, standing on stage during the final fireside chat, Elon was supposed to speak about AI scalability and interplanetary logistics. He touched on those topics, briefly. But as the conversation shifted toward visions of the future and responsibility, Elon paused. The room went still. There was a time, he said, when I measured everything by efficiency and scale, throughput, output, disruption. He let the words hang there for a moment, surveying the quiet crowd. But the last few months, Elon continued slowly, have taught me something I never learned in engineering school. He looked out over the audience, his voice steady. There's nothing more powerful, Elon said, than being truly seen by someone who doesn't have to see you, but chooses to. A few people in the crowd exchanged quiet glances. I'm not talking about the kind of seeing that comes with media coverage or headlines, he continued. I mean the quiet kind, the kind that happens when a 5-year-old sits alone in the dark and decides to love you, even if you didn't earn it. The moderator leaned forward, clearly intrigued. Are you speaking from personal experience? He asked. Elon gave a small nod. And for the first time in years, he didn't try to impress the room. He didn't posture. He didn't perform. He simply spoke from the place inside him that had cracked open that quiet night outside his son's door. I used to think prayer was for people who needed something, he said. But once, I heard my son pray for me. Not to get anything, just to give something. And ever since, I've been trying to figure out how to live up to that moment. The room stayed completely silent. Not from confusion, but because, deep down, everyone there recognized what he meant. They, too, had needed that kind of grace at some point. Quiet. Undeserved. Unearned. When the summit wrapped up, Elon didn't linger for the cocktail hour or networking sessions. Instead, he went straight to find X, who was still in the garden, sitting cross-legged, doodling happily in his sketch pad. They didn't talk much on the flight home. They didn't need to. A few weeks later, X started a new habit. After dinner, while Elon caught up on emails or scanned reports, X would quietly draw pictures for people around the house, the chef, the housekeeper, even the security guard at the front gate. Little crayon portraits, each with stars drawn above the person's head, and a short, handwritten note. You make good dinners. Thank you for keeping us safe. He never asked Elon to deliver them. He simply left them where they'd be found. And sometimes, Elon wouldn't even realize it until someone came up smiling and said, Your son left this for me. One evening, curious, Elon finally asked, Why do you do that? X thought about it for a moment. Because, he said simply, it feels good to know you're not invisible. Elon felt something tight and warm press against his ribs at those words. That night, instead of journaling the usual reflections, he scribbled a new question at the top of the page. How many people do I see? Without ever letting them know. From then on, he made it a daily practice, not just to notice, but to name. He started writing short, honest thank you notes. He asked real follow-up questions when he talked to people. He made it a goal to say at least one sentence every day that might make someone feel less alone. It wasn't about becoming more pious. It wasn't about adopting some structured belief system. It was about something simpler, deeper. It was about love. It was the kind of love his son had whispered into the dark, not to impress, not to gain anything, but simply to reach out and connect. Months later, Elon would find himself remembering one quiet evening in particular. X was curled up in his lap, the two of them staring out a window streaked with rain. Do you think God still listens even if we stop talking for a while? X asked softly. Elon thought for a moment. I think so, he said. But I also think he waits for us to speak again. X nodded thoughtfully. Then I hope he hears me tomorrow. Why tomorrow? Elon asked, curious. Because I'm going to pray for you again, X said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Elon blinked, caught off guard. You are. X nodded seriously. Even though you're not as tired anymore. A small, genuine smile crossed Elon's face. That means more to me than you probably realize. X tilted his head slightly, studying him. No, he said softly. I think you do realize. Years later, if anyone were to ask Elon what had changed him, what softened his sharpest edges, what cracked open doors he didn't even know were locked, he wouldn't point to a quote. He wouldn't mention a book. He would simply say it was a whisper. A quiet, small voice in the night. A child who asked for nothing and gave him everything.